Happy New Year and welcome to our second annual Christian effing Bale Month. It's a fandom thing too. I didn't say that, but hey, it is our unofficial mascot, Christian Bale. It's his month to shine. We celebrate him every January. This started last year, as you may know. And if you don't know how the whole Christian Bale thing started, go back, listen to our girlfriends episode. I am not kidding. That's where the Christian Bale thing came about. Carla and I started talking about how excited we were to talk about American Psycho, and then started talking about Christian Bale, and then it all grew from there. So he has become our unofficial mascot. Someday, maybe he will give us the okay that he can be our official mascot. But until then, we will still keep calling it that for reasons. But I'm excited because we're going to kick things off with a movie that I know I probably should have done last year, but I didn't. And that's Empire of the Sun. And I have a great, fantastic panel with me. So the way I'm going to do this is a little bit differently. I'm just going to introduce everyone. Welcome to the stage, so to speak. So first up, like I said, we would not have this month, we would not have this man be such a integral part of this podcast if it hadn't been for that discussion that Carla and I had back in 2020. So welcome to the stage, Carla.
Hello, everybody. Hello.
Welcome back to the second annual Christian effing Bale Month. Thank you so much, as always.
It is my pleasure to be here, as always, and especially on Christian Bale's month.
The best month of the year.
The best month.
I say it's October, but really, it's this month.
It's really
his month.
Bale month. Yes, exactly.
It's Christian's
Very excited.
month.
I've been looking forward to this for many, many weeks.
Me too, as Carla can attest to, since I have been already bombarding her. I have so many that I haven't sent her of TikToks and stuff of Christian.
I am shocked that any exist that you haven't sent me.
Tons. I have so many that I haven't sent because I'm trying to kind of spread it out. But yes, and now coming to the stage, brand new to our Christian effing Bale month, but we're so excited to have her. So Judy, hi Judy. Can't hear you. Can't hear you. We can't hear you. Oh no. Technical difficulties, everybody. We recorded a little mini episode before this. No.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, I can hear you now. Woohoo! Bloopers for the.
So I was saying, Carla, you set the bar high with your fancy wave. So, hello, everybody.
Thank you. Well, I'm very excited to have you joining on our second annual Christian Bale Month. These are so much fun. And I can't wait for you to meet, quote unquote, Christian whenever he appears. He decides when he comes on. It's, he's a diva that way. Not really.
Can't tell him what to do. Unless you're a director, in which case you do tell him what to do and he does it magically. But, whatever.
Magically. Awesome. Okay. And now, coming up last but not least, Paula. Hey, Paula. Welcome.
Hello.
Welcome to Christian effing Bale Month.
Yay.
And Paula was on our Christian Bale episode last year discussing The Prestige, where, once again, quote unquote, Christian told us that he went to extreme lengths for that character as well, cutting off his fingers and then having them sewed back on immediately after.
Just amazing, the dedication.
The things you'll do for your art. Amazing.
Yes, as we know, Christian goes above and beyond. There's a piece of trivia for this one that he was already doing a little bit of that kind of stuff, even as a young child. So this is something that's been in his blood forever, I guess. He just gives it his all. And before I give my little trivia for this film, I'm going to do something that may or may not be a good idea. So to kick off the new year and to kick off Christian Bale Month, I have, for the podcast listeners, I have a shot of limoncello. This is a really big shot. I should not have poured such a big one. All this. That this is from Italy. So this is the real thing here. This is like a high percentage of alcohol. And I'm doing this right before we start this conversation. So this, I may or may not regret this later. My panelists may or may not regret this later. We'll see. So cheers to a happy new year. Let's see how this goes.
Cheers.
Holy crap, that is okay. I cannot do that whole thing. So anyway, they say to drizzle that over ice cream or something. I don't know, too. That's a suggestion.
Oh, that sounds amazing.
Yeah.
Okay. I only did like a tiny bit of it too. Whew, gosh, I can feel that burning down into my stomach.
Oh my gosh, this is gonna be a good one.
Oh, yes. I don't have anywhere to go. Don't worry. Don't worry. I'm home, safe and sound. Walking Fergie later may be a chore, but hey, we'll see how that goes. So, if you don't know what Empire of the Sun is, oh, I'm still on Cocaine Bear. 1 second here. Sorry, everybody. A little technical difficulties there. So, Empire of the Sun came out in 1987. It is directed by Steven Spielberg, written by Tom Stoppard, did the screenplay. It is based on the novel by J.G. Ballard. And also uncredited writer is Menno Mejis. So there's actually somebody else who helped write this, not credited though. And once again, like I said, it was directed by Steven Spielberg, and it is the story of a young English boy, played by Christian Bale, who struggles to survive under Japanese occupation of China during World War II. It also stars John Malkovich, Miranda Richardson, Nigel Havers, Joe Pantoliano, Emily Richard. It also has a very, very young Ben Stiller. I don't know if my panelists realize.
I was so excited.
Yes, definitely recognized him.
I know. I was like, oh, there's a little baby Ben Stiller.
Trying his best.
Yes, everybody's like a baby in this, though. So yes. And a little bit of trivia. There's a bunch of trivia for this. So I'll just read a couple of that, and then I'll end with some quotes from Christian himself about this film. So Eric Flynn, who plays a British POW, was actually a POW as a child in a Japanese camp. Christian Bale was selected out of more than 4,000 who auditioned. Steven Spielberg had seen Bale in Anastasia, The Mystery of Anna from 1986, and Amy Irving, who starred in it, personally recommended Bale to Spielberg, her then husband. Spielberg hadn't thought much of Bale in the miniseries, but cast him in the role of Jim after he auditioned. Christian Bale, here is where that stuff comes in. Christian Bale used to try and breathe heavily. He would do run-ups and jump up and down for 5 minutes before every take. So, Christian starting early there with the preparation. The Welsh lullaby, which was selected to be used because Christian Bale, if you don't know, Christian Bale is Welsh. So it was selected because of that, to kind of honor that. Sugan, it tells of a mother's love for her child, telling him that she will keep him warm and safe and nothing will threaten him. The movie's plot revolves around Jim being separated from his mother and father at a young age and having to survive numerous deadly dangers by his wits alone. So that is the lullaby that you hear throughout the movie. During the prison camp scenes, Christian Bale was wearing a wig that made his hair look more rugged and not as sleek as in his schoolboy outfit. In Rescue Dawn from 2006, which we will definitely be talking about at some point during one of these years, because that's one of my absolute favorite Christian Bale performances, which was made 19 years after this film, Christian Bale recounts an incident during World War II in which an American fighter plane on a strafing run flew closely past him with the canopy open and the pilot's looking straight at him with his goggles up. So it's supposed to be kind of reference to this. And then early in this film, a youthful Christian Bale runs through the streets of Shanghai, China, attempting to elude invading Japanese troops. Early in the film, The Flowers of War, which is a fantastic little film that we will cover as well, a middle-aged Christian Bale. I love that they had to put in there a middle-aged Christian Bale, so just an adult Christian Bale runs through the streets of Nanking, China, attempting to elude invading Japanese troops. And then this little bit of trivia is the last one of trivia, and then I have a couple of quotes. But Steven Spielberg had planned a long, continuous shot with Jim standing on top of the building at the prison camp, watching the American planes bomb the airfields. The shot was very complicated and would require a single take. He gave instructions to Christian Bale to get excited, jump up and down, and run around on the rooftop as the planes passed and the bombs went off. However, Bale became nervous as the stunts began and didn't do much of anything. Since most of the explosions had been used up on this shot, Spielberg, after some soft, fatherly words with the young Bale, improvised with several shots from different close-up angles, eventually getting Bale to give a more excited performance. And then I want to say, and we'll probably be talking about this too, and I'll give some trigger warnings before we get into the whole thing, but Christian Bale has spoken about how he really did not like being a child actor and didn't like the fame that came with it. It wasn't so much the acting, it was like the fame part of it and stuff. There is an interview he did where he talks about how he wanted to stop doing it, but because the money was so good for his family, he felt a sense of obligation to his family. And I want to just say, and Carla and I talked about this before, do not do this to your children. If your children should not be, they should not be the ones that help you financially. And it makes me very sad that that happened to him. I mean, he speaks about it in a way where he doesn't speak about it like, he speaks about it so matter-of-factly, but it colored the way he kind of views it. And views acting and performing and stuff. So it just makes me very sad. So, but he said on the sudden fame that resulted after the film, Christian Bale said, "I enjoyed making the film, but I was shocked when I received all the attention when I got home. Girls were all over me. Boys wanted to fight me when all I wanted to do was ride my BMX bike into the woods. I told my parents I wasn't interested in doing anything again because the attention ruined it." And then he also said about the media attention, "It was horrific. I was almost crying in interviews and running away during press conferences, pretending I was going to the bathroom and just disappearing." So I'm bringing this up just because I think he's so incredible in this movie. And it just really breaks my heart that a young kid was put through that. And so many child actors are. So this is not just as people know. So yeah, so don't use your children and don't live vicariously through your children, please, too, because I think that's another part of what happens sometimes. Okay, so before we get into the movie, just a quick trigger warning. This, of course, deals with war, lots of war, prisoners of war, so lots of that kind of stuff. There's not like intensive torture scenes per se, but there's starvation, a lot of sickness, stuff like that. And of course, racism. Big one for this one as well. So what I first want to know, Carla, is your overall thoughts on Christian Bale, since it is his month, his performance, and his character. Jim.
I think, obviously we talk about Christian Bale and his ability so much that we have a whole month dedicated to him now, but it's for a reason. I mean, you look at a role that he did when he was 13, and every frame that he's in is totally believable, that he is 100% this kid, that this kid is going through these things. There isn't a moment where it feels cheesy or forced or coached. You can get lost in the story because he is so present in every moment. And it's rare enough for actors to have that ability, but to start having it so young is just absolutely amazing. Um, his There are so many like things that he does with his face that you recognize that he does now, and that's not a bad thing. It's there are things that work that he does frequently, but they never feel repetitive and they never feel like he's phoning it in. And the film is completely heartbreaking so much of the time. And even with the story being what it is, with all the things that Jim goes through, even I feel like if Jim hadn't gone through every single one of those things that he did, he would still be a sympathetic character because of the performance. It's not just that he's a kid and he's going through stuff and that's sad and it's difficult. So, we give him our heart, which is a thing. I mean, like, there's a reason why we protect kids so much. But Christian Bale, the way that he approaches things, it's a very relatable and human connection that he makes. His ability to connect with his on-screen partners and to elicit all of this emotion within us just with when he's looking at something and then he just lifts his eyes and he looks up. And I think of him doing this in so many movies. And it makes my heart hurt to see him when he's so sad that Basie left him, when he's so devastated that he can't find his parents, when he's on that rooftop talking to the doctor about how he can't remember what his parents look like. And it all feels completely genuine, and it all feels completely spontaneous and in the moment. You don't feel like it doesn't feel like paint by numbers. It doesn't feel um, like a theater production. And it's not to malign that. It's just to say that with him, everything just feels so natural that you kind of forget that it's just a movie and that he's fine. That he's out in LA somewhere with his family. You're just seeing this child going through these things. But I mean that talent is remarkable, even at that young age. I just having watched this movie before and then watching it again now with the purpose of examining it more thoughtfully, um, it was hard to do that because I just wanted to just get lost in it again. Like I really wanted to be there. Oh, I'm gonna critique stuff, and I'm like, but Chrissy B is just killing it.
Yes. Yeah. Yes. So, Judy, I know you love this. This is one of your favorite films, right?
I do. I watched it whenever I was young, and maybe because I was young and it just sucked me in and it made such an impression on me whenever I was young. I've just loved it ever since. Watched it lots of times, and I'm not even sure what about it draws me in so much. Um, I think it's that it is from this child's perspective, and so it's very narrow. There's this giant worldwide war going on around him. He doesn't know or care, right? Like, well, I mean, he cares, but he doesn't care which side wins. He doesn't, understand the geopolitical implications of this enormous situation. He's just trying to survive. Um, and even in the beginning, he doesn't care whether the Japanese win or the Chinese win. He just thinks, airplanes that go vroom vroom are cool. So I don't know. I just love that narrow little bubble that we get to like live with him. Um, As far as Christian Bale's performance of it, it's like Carla said, it's believable. And again, it's because it's that first person perspective. He's in every scene, and he absolutely carries the movie from the opening credits to that last frame where you see his eyes closed. And he's 13 years old. That is a lot of weight to put on a child's shoulders. Although, I mean, Steven Spielberg, especially in the 80s, was so good at
Mhm.
getting those performances from children. Or maybe he's just really good at casting children. I'm not sure. Um, but think of all the movies that he's done with kids and the performances that he has pulled out of them, or just captured. And yeah, so kudos to that relationship, whether it was Christian or Steven or the combination of the two. Um, they definitely brought it. Um, and as far as the character of Jamie slash Jim goes, first of all, I love that they changed his name mid movie.
Mhm.
It's such a cool way to show that he is not the same in this extenuating circumstances. But some things are the same about him, right? From the very beginning, he's this child of just immense curiosity and energy. Um, Probably looks like an ADHD kid to me. um, and I think that's actually what saves him. From the beginning, he doesn't seem to have the attention span for his choir practice, but he does that like surviving thing where he's got one ear listening just enough while his mind is going a thousand other directions. But that ear listening just enough, he can do his parts. He can stay in the moment, and that takes intelligence, along with that curiosity. And he asks so many questions. You could see that intelligence early on, even though it hasn't really blossomed into anything useful yet.
Mhm.
But of course, when all hell breaks loose and he needs to go into survival mode, that's when he's able to improvise and think on his feet and adapt and survive. And it's just such an incredible transition to watch, and see that again just through this child's small circle and child's lens, um, and even the way that he interacts with his community. Um, I think one of the things that's so relatable about it, even though never been a prisoner of war or anything like that, but um, Steven Spielberg and Christian Bale managed to capture that sort of magic and that wonder of childhood, where kids kids know more about their community than anybody. Um, like, I mean, if you think about when you were growing up, you knew every crack in the sidewalk in your neighborhood. You knew the best trees to climb. You knew which neighbors would let you park your bikes in their driveway, all that kind of stuff. These are things that just go right over parents' heads, adults' heads. So I love the way that we get to intimately see all the little details of living in an internment camp through a child's eyes, the way only a child can interpret. Um, so yeah, I just think that they did a brilliant job. It was a brilliant way to tell the story, through a child's eyes, and so it's not just a coming of age, but it also really brings that lens down to smaller situations. So it's not about the bigger war; it's about this one person's story. And I don't know, I just loved it.
Yeah. Paula?
Yeah. I've only seen this movie actually a couple times, and one was when it first came out, and I'm about the same age as Christian Bale, so I got to see that war experience or that prisoner of war experience from a peer. So that was, and it wasn't, and this is going to sound odd, but it wasn't frightening. It was oh, this is survivable. Even if you're a kid, if you um if like you said, if you adapt to your surroundings, you can survive it. As an adult looking at it, it's amazing that this kid was able to go through this experience, and you see little shifts throughout the movie. At first, when he's first separated from his parents, he's terrified and he's desperately trying to just surrender so somebody will take care of him. And he realizes nobody's going to take care of him. Okay, so he goes home and he takes care of himself. And then, he meets Basie and Frank, and he just fits right in with that situation. And then he's in the internment camp and he makes the best of that situation. And it's not until the very end, when he's reunited with his parents, that you really see that how it's affected him, because now it's over and now he doesn't have to deal with this situation. Now he can be a child again. And does he even remember how to just be a kid? And you can just see that he's just standing there waiting, waiting to see if anybody's going to come for him. And you can just see it in his face. He doesn't say a word. It's just there. And the performance is just brilliant. And he's, like you said, he's a child. You don't get that kind of a performance from a lot of adult actors. And you can see the beginnings of his talent developing later on. You can already see those little nuances to his performances, and it's fascinating to watch.
Yeah, and I haven't seen this movie in decades. So going back to it was, I mean, everybody knows how much I love Christian Bale, duh. But going back and watching it and seeing just how natural Christian is in embodying any character. It's like really he disappears so much into characters that you do not see Christian Bale there. Yes, he has his techniques and the certain things that he does, but they're so subtle in a way that it's like you really notice them once you start watching movie after movie back to back to back, but they're still subtle. It doesn't seem like it's a crutch. It seems more just like it's something that he just naturally does. And I think, he said in some interview, he said the thing about children and children as actors is they just don't give a shit. They don't care. They're not going to sit there and care about like, oh, was this a good angle for this or was this a good for that? They're going to be honest and real. And I think that's what you really see in his performance here is you get every little nuance of Jim. And especially, in the beginning, he's just that, carefree child living in the middle of war, but not really grasping that concept, not grasping also what is happening to the other people around him, to the people that work for his family, to, stuff like that. He doesn't realize, what war really is about. And there's the whole scene where they're at that party and he's outside with one of his airplanes because he loves the airplanes and he lets it fly over, and then you see the Japanese troops coming up over the hill and him just standing there like not like all of a sudden it's like this reality kind of in his face and he's not sure what to do with that. And just watching that scene, and it's a terrifying scene because you're watching this little kid and you're like, what's going to happen to this little kid in the middle of this war zone in a way too. And this is before everything really happens. And his performance in that is interesting too, because he's going from being so excited and so joyful and having so much fun. He found that shot down plane and he was in there playing around with it and he's so excited. And then all of a sudden it's like, uh-oh, what is this? What does this mean? What do I do in this situation? Because I'm just a kid. And he does, figure out what to do really quickly, but he also has that fear there. It's heartbreaking because you're watching this kid grow up like that. It's like he goes from, kind of excited to be able to ride his bike around the abandoned house for a minute to, okay, how am I going to eat? What do I eat? What do I do? How do I get food? How do I drink water? Where should I drink water from? And then meeting these people and you're never sure who's going to take advantage of him and what's going to happen. And then when he gets in the internment camps, what's so interesting about that is watching him become like almost like a leader in a way. Like he's so sweet and kind and trying to get food and water and take care of everybody. And he learns how to trade things as well. And, especially working with Bassie and all that stuff. But also watching that heartbreak and learning, I think the big thing that is so shattering about this movie is for his character, this is when he learns that not all adults are good and not all adults are trustworthy and not all adults will be there for you as a kid. And that is a heartbreaking lesson to learn, period. But to learn this way is even more shattering. And there are so many little scenes in this where you see him learning that and where you see him growing and where you see him becoming even angry, because there's always kind of this sense below for a while of still some kind of that joy and innocence, but it slowly gets chipped away. And like the scene when his friend is shot and killed, when he gives him the mango and he's just trying to show him how to open the mango, and so he's got the sword up. That is that is so heartbreaking for many, many reasons. But when he starts, attacking the person who shot his friend, and then when he's in the water and he's trying to bring his friend back, and he had learned how to do, like CPR and all that stuff from the doctor, and he's just there, just like I can do it. I can bring him back. I can bring everything back. I can bring everything back. And that's when you really see him really crumble. And he's already breaking a lot, but it's really from that moment on when, for the rest of the film, the little bit that's left after that, he's completely broken. And even though everything is quote unquote over, it's like he seems even more shattered than he did before. And then the moment when he's reunited with his parents, and like he had mentioned before, he didn't remember what they looked like. And when he's reunited with them and he's standing there and his skin looks off and everything, and he reaches out because his parents recognize him and reaches out, and when he touches his mom and touches like her mouth and it's, oh my gosh. And it's just like when he closes his eyes, it's like, okay, maybe I can relax a little bit. Maybe I can be safe. But, he probably would, he still is going to have lots of stuff to deal with after that. But it is just an absolutely harrowing performance and thing to watch. And it's really hard to watch, and it's heartbreaking and sad. And yeah, but Christian Bale is so, so incredible because he's never like over the top. And when he gets excited, it's natural. And when he gets upset, it's natural. So there's never a false note in his performance at all. And we will be talking about Steven Spielberg in a little bit. And Spielberg has, like Judy mentioned, worked with a lot of child actors and brought out great performances. And the thing is from everything I've heard from children who have worked with Steven Spielberg, he's very different to work with than other directors because he's not mean to the kids. He's always been very fatherly. Like Drew Barrymore considers him like, because everybody knows Drew Barrymore's childhood was horrible, but Steven Spielberg was wonderful to her. She still considers him like her, godfather, really. And so I've heard that from a lot of kids who worked with him, so I think that helps, having a child feel safe on set, especially when, like Christian Bale said, his parents weren't there. So he didn't have his parents, and he's this young kid away from home doing this work, which, he's in so much of this movie. I'm like, it must have taken a long time because of the fact that you still have the child labor laws. So, you can't work a child a certain number of hours and all of that stuff. So, yeah, but it's absolutely, absolutely incredible. And, he's just a natural talent. And I think he was just born with this talent. And I think the other reason, and I think you see it at this young age, that Christian Bale is such a great actor is he's not a selfish actor. He wants everybody to do as good as he does. He wants everybody to be at the same level. And if they, exceed him and go beyond him, he will be one of the first to really talk about that. I've seen lots of interviews where, I mean, an interview where he talks about Heath Ledger and how, well, I was basically nothing once I saw what Heath Ledger was doing. So it's that kind of thing. And he doesn't, and yes, this is him 13, but you still can see it. He doesn't have this ego that permeates his roles. And I think that is very essential. Like, I don't think he realizes how good he is. He knows he can do his job, but I don't think he realizes just how good he really is. And I think you can see that in this too. So, yeah. Okay. Well, I want to know sort of your other thoughts on the film aside from Bale's performance and Bale's character, and then like if there are any other characters that really stick out to you in this, Carla.
The thing that I find most interesting about this film is that it is such an American thing. It is such an American thing to take a setting like Shanghai and make it just about the white people. It's all of these things that are happening where China is in the middle of a war against Japan and they're fighting for their liberty while Japan is trying to take over. Well, let's focus on this English family. Let's focus on this English kid. And from what I understand, it's the movie is based off of a book by somebody who went through this. I don't know to what extent it's like I don't know what parts of it are true, what parts of it are exaggerated or made up for the film, but still it's even with that aspect thrown in, it is such an American thing to make a movie like this. And where a lot of the tension, yes, there's a war going on, yes, they're in an internment camp, but it's the British versus the Americans, and that clash of cultures there. Everybody in this movie who is not English or American is pretty much a hired hand of some kind, whether it's Jim's, nanny or chauffeur, or the soldiers who are basically the hired hand of their empire, the Japanese, or because again, Shanghai, how many Chinese people do you see in the movie past the first few minutes? But I think it's perhaps an accidental telling of what American men are like. That selfishness, that callousness, that self-centeredness. And yes, I know, okay, not all men, but when you think about the fact that like the people that Jim most wants to emulate and wants to be like and wants to be with are some of the most unscrupulous, horrible people in the entire film. I mean, you're kind of telling on yourself there. It's very interesting to me, the tack that they took in the telling of this story. And the British in this film and the Americans in this film do what Westerners do best, which is make everything about themselves while elevating themselves over the people whose land they're on. So like that's something that like every time that I watch the film, I'm like, they couldn't have maybe talked a little bit about, some of the people who actually lived there before these people got there. When Amma slaps Jim, after, like the parents aren't around, so it's not like they can say anything. They can't fire her because they don't own anything anymore. So she slaps him. And listen, I get that he was a brat. I get that he was spoiled and difficult, but that's still that still really bothers me because he's still a child and he's just gone through the loss of his parents. Like, but that is like basically the only real big connection moment that you get with him and anybody from China in the movie, because everything else you can pretty much discount. It's incidental, whereas this is like a big important moment in the movie. I was very curious too, like one thing that is implied, but I guess it's better that it's just implied, is in the mother's bedroom where you have all of the powder on the floor, and you just see the footprints, but then you see like the evidence of a struggle, like what happened there. It's very interesting to me, and it was so beautifully shot too, so beautiful and so um, evocative, that you have just this footprint that just like looks placidly like, oh, somebody's just walking carelessly through this bedroom, and Jim doesn't really seem to register perhaps the significance of those handprints that look like they're being dragged away, and like boot prints next to it, and like what may have happened. Um it's like its own little set piece right there within this movie, and it's beautiful and poetic as he opens the window and it gets just wiped away by that breeze. um I think that that's maybe a moment that gets overlooked in this film. And I think that it is an absolute masterpiece in storytelling, that you're getting a small story told within this bigger story. And, for all that I'm decrying all of the things that are wrong in this very American depiction of a war elsewhere, it's still very masterfully done. Um, but yeah, I love. I mean, there's a reason why so many people love the cinematography and the direction and all of these visual components of the film. Why it's brought up so often as an example of great storytelling, because it is very well told. And even though it does have that Spielbergian problem of like, bro, where's the story going? You don't feel like just tuning out and shutting it off. Like you kind of are like, all right, okay, but maybe there's something else that you want. Oh, you're done with this. We're moving on. Okay, I guess we're moving on now. Somehow he still makes me want to watch it. He makes me want to watch it more than once. I don't know how the man does it. It makes no sense to me. I think in the hands of a lesser filmmaker, I might be like, click, done with this. But it's it's still very good, and it kind of makes me mad because I'm like, I want to be upset at you for this, but it's still excellent. But on the whole, overall thoughts on the film. Those are like my little pinpoints and pinpricks about it. But overall, it is a masterfully told story with an amazing filmmaker and a more than amazing young actor. As far as like what side characters, I never liked Basie. It always, just anybody who takes advantage of kids and who is so careless about a child's life, I just can't connect with on a level other than great performance, good acting. I would punch you in the face if I met you in the street. Just makes me so angry. Mrs. Victor, I thought was devastating. Like that is a very interesting story, just her. And I kind of like that you don't get too much of the victors, because it's almost more significant that you're only seeing their interactions glancingly as this small child is um, learning about trust and about adults and who to idolize and why is he idolizing them, and um, why he cares about their opinions of him. But as soon as everything goes south, he comes back and they, no words, just bring him back into the fold, just as I think a parent should with their kid, because you have to give your children the freedom to make mistakes and to fall on their knees and to um yeah, just to make mistakes. But then at the end of the day, you need to be there for them and tell them, okay, it didn't work out. I'm not going to say I told you so. I'm not going to make you feel bad about it. I'm just going to put your poster back up and make your bed. You're home now. You're safe. um so that heartbreaking moment when they're in that graveyard of riches and excess, and she can't go on any longer. She doesn't know where her husband is. She's lost him somewhere, and he chooses to stay with her. And then she dies, and he sees the glow from the atomic bomb, and he he thinks that it's her ascending to heaven. It's so beautiful, and that is like one of the most childlike moments in the movie. It's one of the most innocent, pure moments in this devastating film. Which, by the way, Aaron, I really appreciate how you decided to start off the new year
You're
with
welcome.
making us watch something that's going to make us all sob. Thank you so much for ushering in 2023 with heartbreak. But that moment is so because let me tell you, I was watching the movie as I was, looking at the clock for midnight, and I paused it, I think, like 20 minutes shy of the ending, so I could, eat my 12 grapes for New Year and then resume it. And I was like, great. I hope this doesn't pretend anything, because this is very sad. But anyway, it's a magical moment in the movie, and I think because Spielberg, and we'll get more into him. You know what? I'll just save that part for later. But it's about the ending.
Yeah.
Okay.
And you're welcome, by the way. But next week we're lightening it up with a musical. So, I mean, it's kind of lightening it up. I mean,
A little bit of
Just a little
whiplash. That's
bit.
okay.
yeah, yes, yes. So Judy.
Yeah, really interesting observations there, Carla. And I think that, well, first of all, just a comment on the story itself. My understanding is it is autobiographical. The guy that wrote it was in an internment camp, and in the end, he met back up with the doctor, and the doctor helped him find his mother or something. But yeah, my understanding is that it's autobiographical. Um, so for that reason, I kind of give it a pass on it's not about the larger story of things going on in the world. It's about this one boy's experience. Um, but I do think it's interesting, at least in the beginning, um, when we see the scene where the British families are all going to this party, and they're all being chauffeured to the party in their big fancy cars driven by Chinese nationals, of course. Um, and they're all dressed in these lavish, let's be honest, outlandish costumes for the situation at hand, especially because they're surrounded by throngs of, hungry, scared, poor Chinese, and they're just, begging for help from these people who are spending exorbitant amounts of money on this stupid party. And it's this cognitive dissonance that's really shocking, that he puts us in the middle of, showing us both situations, and that they're just, keep your eyes straight ahead and don't look at the terror happening around us. Um, and it's at least it's a acknowledgement, kind of what you were talking about, of this Western view of the world, this colonial view of the world, where they're just detached uh, from the people that live and who've lived there first in all these countries that they just set up residences. Um, and yeah, it's definitely a superiority thing, a Western thing, to just um, you know play a violin while the boat sinks. Just party on while this craziness is going on all around you. So I think that Spielberg at least made an attempt, to show us this weird contrast, from the world that Jamie grew up in to what he's about to face. And it definitely doesn't get into the horrors that happened to the to the Chinese people. It definitely, focuses on just the white people in this one camp. But there were, and I know we're going to talk about the war, but there were absolute horrors that happened to uh, the Chinese people around that time after the fall of Shanghai, um, that not only aren't addressed, but aren't even talked about at all. But I guess for that reason, I think it's purposeful. That the film doesn't take any kind of heavy-handed political stances. And again, I think it's because that's not what matters to Jim. Um, he's a child who doesn't understand the nuances of um, nationalism and political fanaticism and this war that's going on and the whole global economy. And he doesn't know or care about any of that. He's just surviving. So yeah, I think that's why it feels so Western view of of what's going on there. Not to necessarily justify it, but I can see how it would be so focused on this one person if it's just that one person's experiences. Yeah, I don't have any complaints about them, the film focusing just on the story, since it is an autobiography of that one child's experience, um, and almost a coming of age story. But I do love the way that that they showed this expanding of this character from starting out kind of a little bit of a brat, um, and very self-absorbed, to um, a much more caring person, empathetic. He helps the doctor, takes care of patients, and he feeds people throughout the community, and he cares for Mrs. Victor. Um, so yeah, I think it's a coming of age story, and showing that when he was originally in this very limited, very British, Western point of view of, we're just in this isolated little bubble, to at least expanding his family and his concerns to outside of his own self. So I guess he learned something there. um yeah, and as far as other performances, I mean, I just have to give a nod to John Malkovich always. Yes, Basie was terrible, but he played him, beautifully, as John Malkovich usually does. So
Yeah, he's always incredible in everything
yeah,
he does.
right.
And he's so young in this. I'm like, that was the biggest thing that stuck out to me.
I know. I was like, baby Malkovich. Holy smokes.
And the Ben Affleck too. I mean, well, not Ben Affleck. What's his name? Stiller.
Ben Stiller.
Oh
Ben
my
Stiller.
god! When we see him, and he's like, I think he took some acting classes after that. It wasn't his best.
I was mostly focused on how cute he was. I was like, oh my gosh,
He was.
you are such a handsome young man.
Yeah. So Paula.
Yeah, I had to do a double take and check IMDb. I'm like, is that him? He looks so young. Yeah, being that it was, based on the author's, like, I can't remember. I know Jamie's character was named after the author of the book. So knowing that it's being told through that lens, kids don't really pay attention to what's going on in the wider world. They're kind of more focused on their immediate situation. So again, not that it's the best way to do it, but I can see why they went with that very narrow lens of what was going on. I mean, you still got little glimpses of it, but I think it was kind of telling too. There was a scene at that party where Jamie asked his father, "Who do you think's going to win the war?" And his dad's like, "Well, of course we are." And he's like, "That wasn't the war that he was talking about." It's like, "Oh, you mean the Japanese and Chinese?" "Oh, I don't know." So it is very, well, if it's not directly affecting us, then it doesn't really matter, kind of an attitude of the white people that were in Shanghai, until it did affect them. And um, I thought the way it was shot was very well done, and I kind of appreciate the fact that, yes, there are all these horrors going around. You know that there's these horrible things happening, but you didn't have to see it graphically to know and understand that it was happening, and it was still impactful. You saw people as they were heading toward that stadium at the end that were just lying on the side of the road. You assume that they've died, but there was nothing graphic about it. Even when there was, when Basie was being beat, it didn't focus on that. It panned away, and it didn't zoom in on that happening. So, but you still got the sense of what was happening, and it was still impactful to what was going on without having to sort of be sensationalized. So I really appreciate that kind of um, storytelling. Um, and I don't think I can add much more.
Yeah, I mean, the big thing, I wrote in my notes, white culture was the very first thing I wrote in my notes watching this now, and appropriation in a lot of respects too, and overindulgence, and like with the whole party scene and everything, and I it is very white focused. I do think that maybe they were trying to pepper in a couple of things in there with having that party, with the racial slurs you would hear every once in a while, from Basie, also not just the party goers, but you hear it later on as well. All throughout the movie, you'll just hear just little bits and pieces of that. um I mean, yeah, it is Jim's story, but it is very white centered, which is what we do a lot when we're telling these stories. If we're going to find a story to tell, and do that, because people think that the only way you can make something like this sympathetic is if you view it from the white lens. And even though they're trying to put a lot of that stuff in there, like little sprinklings, it, it's still is from the white lens. Even watching Jim is a child and innocent, and children are inherently, it's that's what the selfish thing, but it's like they're teenagers are self-centered, and this is a 13-year-old, so yes, he's going to be a little self-centered. So you have that, but even being like, okay, well, Jim kind of changes and is even more open because of being able to experience the tortures and horrors of war firsthand. So it's kind of like the same, it's kind of like, I'm not saying that he was ever like racist or anything. It's just kind of like that old trope of the white person goes through this trauma and then becomes more open and more aware and more, caring kind of thing. um and I think, what I kept thinking of when Carla was talking was, there's a lot of people, it reminded me, for some reason this just stuck out to me, because I was talking about this the other day to somebody. There are these TikToks you will see of people leaving the United States, and they go and they move to another country, and they're like, oh, this is so amazing here, everybody's so carefree, the locals are all so great and wonderful and happy all the time. And then you'll get people that live in that country saying, well, you're making all this money and we're not making money. And so it's that same thing of like living in this country, like with that party, and you're like living in this opulence. Meanwhile, the country that you are, in a lot of respects invading is not living in that opulence that you're living in, but you're choosing to ignore it because you're white, and racism, and because of the beauty, and because you don't want to see it, because then you have to confront stuff about yourself and your involvement in all of it. And so I do think there is an undercurrent of that in here, but it's not something that a lot of people are willing to explore or to show from different points of view. So I think it would have been interesting, but I think it would have been too much war for one thing for us to do like the war movies that Christian Bale has done, because some of them are a little bit different. Like Flowers of War is a lot different because Christian Bale's character is like, I think, one of the only white people in the movie. So that would have been an interesting one to counteract for this one. So we might have to, we'll definitely gonna do that movie at some point, but it would have been too much, I think, to do a bunch of war movies for this one, to do this.
God, can you
Rescue
imagine?
Dawn, another prisoner of war movie.
2023, the year of war and Christian Bale.
No. So, but it would be an interesting thing to kind of examine. Maybe we'll do that as a Patreon bonus someday. We'll examine the many different ways that Christian Bale has, not that Christian Bale has explored war, but you know what I'm talking Christian, the many different ways you've explored war in your life, which I know, I don't know. But, and there is always, and we'll be talking, of course, about Spielberg soon, but there is always that undercurrent of Spielberginess, as I like to call it, throughout this movie. So I think when you see that and of course that changes when he does stuff like Schindler's List, but there isn't as much of the graphicness of war in this movie, but the internment camp scenes were cut down a lot. So who knows what there was. And Mrs. Victor, so Miranda, played by Miranda Richardson, who's fantastic, her role was cut down a lot too. So she had a lot more stuff in it too, I guess, originally. So, but they cut it a lot. But I think that character is so interesting because it's really a mother relationship there. But there's also this other sense of like Jim is growing and trying to understand people and people's relationships and men and women together and that kind of thing as well. But I do think their relationship is interesting to watch because Jim is so craving his mom, I think more than his father. He is craving his mother. He wants that motherly love. And he sees that with her. And whenever he's like, you've got to just leave her. And he's like, I'm not leaving her, kind of thing. He doesn't outright say that, and he becomes like a caretaker for her. And when he's like, play dead, we got to play dead. We got to play dead. And how she listens to him and does that. And then, yeah, that atom bomb scene. And when he thinks it's her soul. And then later when he says that, and how heartbroken he is that wasn't her soul, that instead it was another aspect of this war. And this aspect of what mankind can do to each other, what humankind does to each other. And what a horrible, awful way to learn that lesson, kind of thing. So, yeah. And yes, John Malkovich is outstanding. That character is so awful because, oh my gosh, the stuff he does to Jim, it's just, and you're always on edge. You're always thinking, okay, like in the beginning when he's like, look at your teeth. You're like, oh my gosh, is he going to pull his teeth out? It's that kind of, yes, that's the fear.
I thought that too. Oh my God.
And when he falls asleep after he's eaten the rice, you're like, okay, so he's drugged him so he can pull out his teeth. That's all I was thinking. And I'm like, oh my gosh, because people who hurt children, there is a special place in where for you. I just don't get that thinking. And even though he never like really physically he really hurts Jim tremendously. He lies to him. He runs away from the camp without him when he promised him, and the way he's so callously, even in the end, is like, you want a Hershey's bar? And it's just this callousness there behind that when Jim has just lost a friend, when he's alone and no one is staying there with him. And it's so sad. And, Frank is also absolutely horrendous. And Frank is like jealous of Jim. It's so icky. I'm like, seriously? And he even gives like, his fancy chocolate. And I'm like, he's helping anyway. And when he's begging to get on that truck, oh my gosh, I'll do anything. I'll work for you, Basie. I'll do it. That's so sad. So yeah. Okay. Well, we'll talk. I mean, we've already mentioned a little bit about the handling of war in this, but whenever you're talking about a war movie, and Spielberg would go on to do several war movies himself. So, Carla, how do you think they handled that aspect of it, the war parts?
I think that in a way, the movie Life is Beautiful reminds me a lot of the handling of the war in this film. That it's done in such a way that the war is the setting, but it's not the central focus. And it's because you are trying to preserve some sort of innocence for the children. Where Life is Beautiful, it's the father trying to make his kids able to live through a concentration camp by making it into like a plaything all the way until the very end for him. I mean, like I'm getting goosebumps because that scene just chills me to the core because it's that devotion of a parent in trying to make life as manageable for his children as possible. It's similar in this movie where, because it is a child, and this child doesn't have parents for most of the movie. He has parent figures or people to whom he ascribes parental traits, but for most of the movie he's fending for himself. So he has to create his own happy place in this movie. So he's focusing on things that are manageable for him. And kids are incredibly adaptable. They the skills that they lack in the physical strength and mental acuity and all of these things, they more than make up for in uh, adapting themselves to their surroundings and to their circumstances. And he does this very well, where he turns pretty much everything into a game of, yes, he is taking on this huge burden of caring for like everybody that he can in this camp, but he's doing it in a way that's playful, where like yes, I'm going to steal these marbles, but I'm giving them to this other kid so that he can play with them. And he's trading these cigarettes for vegetables. So these are all things that for a kid might sound like a fun time, like a just uh, an approachable, an accessible way for a child to participate in the adult society around him while still making it a game. Because with kids, the easiest way to get them to do something is to turn it into a game. And he has nobody to kind of gamify things for him, so he does it for himself. Basie arguably does this for him, but he does it for his own needs and desires. He doesn't do it for Jim's happiness and health, which the scene that I think none of us have mentioned so far is when he is taking wagers on Jim's life as Jim is trying to, cut across the thing, the fence to set up these traps. And oh my god, made me livid at Basie and all of the other people, the other Americans there. But so again, the handling, the war aspect was handled, I think, appropriately for the story that was being told. And I want to go back for a moment because I just want to emphasize that the issue isn't that the particular story was centered on, I mean, it is, but it is a problem, but that it's centered on the white people in this film. It's the fact that these are the stories that get told, the stories about the white people. So I'm not taking anything back that I said. I still think it's important to mention the fact that it's a very white story set in a very non-white place. And again, we're focusing on that small percentage of white people in a place where countless others who actually live there went through that and so much worse. But Um, as far as focusing on this story about Jim, it needed to be told that way to make it to make the story stand out. You have to have like the right amount of spices in your dish to heighten the flavor of what you're trying to make stand out. And what you're trying to make stand out is this child's loss of innocence. And it doesn't have to be done in a graphic, gory, violent way. It can be done with something as simple as him losing his ability to trust the people around him, and him losing a friend that he was making. That's like honestly like the one violent loss in his life. And of course, it had to be the Japanese boy, but that's the one graphic loss in his life. And the end of the war, I think it's, and again, it might be an accidental thing that yes, the Americans came and rescued whatever these people from the camp, but also insidiously, it's the American prisoners who were um, the most awful among the most awful people in the film. So I kind of like that because it doesn't make the Americans the heroes. It doesn't make them like the good guys who just show up and say, "Hey, everybody, we're here to rescue you. Follow me on yonder." I don't know. Um, you're getting all kind of sides of that equation. Um, the focus on the airplanes, on the warplanes, I think is really, really cool because it's a child and he is fascinated by these things. I think, and I don't, it's not that adults can't be fascinated by these things, but children, they don't have to worry about mortgages and bills and, great grandma's psoriasis. They can just focus very huge swaths of their brain and mental energy on little things like this. This is why I think you talk to kids and they have like such in-depth encyclopedic knowledge of so many cool things. It's because, yes, you also don't have to worry about paying the pediatrician. um, but his focus and his love of aviation and of planes, his I really think that that it's a cool diversion for us as an audience to be able to focus on that aspect of the war, on the planes and how cool the planes were, and what features they had versus these other planes, because there is a lot going on, and it can be very emotionally um, exhausting. But when it's focused this way, it's a lot more bearable, which is why I think this movie is so rewatchable, because you don't have to sit through. This movie was like 2.5 hours.
Yeah.
You don't have to sit through 2.5 hours of just gore and graphic loss. You are dealing with loss, but it's done in a way that you don't want to like kind of go sit in a corner and cry for 3 years, maybe like a year and a half, but not 3.
Oh, we've all done our little crying over this movie, I think.
Oh, for sure.
A year and a half. Judy.
Yeah, Carla, it's interesting what you said about the airplanes, the focus on the airplane. From a child's perspective, it can just be this cool machine, but you don't have to think about this machine is also an instrument of murder. Like, this is what we use to kill thousands and thousands of people. Um, so it's a dichotomy too. It's a child has an obsession with this, neat machine, but this is also a machine that is causing the death of so many. If you think too much about it, it hurts. um, and also I thought it was really interesting what you said about these are the stories that are told, um, because talking about the fall of Shanghai and how that particular part of the war went. I am over 50 years old, and I only recently learned of one of the things that happened because of the fall of Shanghai was the rape of Nanking. And that story has never been told. I did not even know before, I don't know, in the last few years that after the Japanese invaded, they took over the town of Nanking, and at least 80,000, probably closer to 100,000 women and children were raped and murdered and tortured in the most brutal ways over, I forget how long of a period of time, but while the Japanese were in charge of the city. And all of that's just glossed over, and those stories are so important, and we don't hear them because our stories are told from that Western point of view, from a white person's perspective, or from a colonizer perspective. So, not that I necessarily want to watch a movie about the rape of Nanking, but it's really important history that I should have known before my middle age. And you know, because we focus so much on the stories of our Western points of view, I think that there's so much that we miss out on. So excellent point. Thank you. um, but yeah, as far as the handling of war, I think exactly what Carla said. It's the setting, not necessarily the story. Jim is this character who is plucked and put down into these extenuating circumstances, and we get to see how he reacts to them. That could have been war, that could have been stolen and put in the circus. I mean, it could have been anything, but it's just this child's experience in a strange situation where he has to learn to survive, learn to expand his horizons beyond his own little bubble. I think uh, that's why the war is a background setting and not.
Oh, we lost your sound. We lost your sound.
Sorry, bumped.
That's okay.
But yeah, I was just saying I think that's why it is the setting and not the story.
Yeah. Yeah, and I added something on there, so for the trigger warning for the essay, sexual assault stuff there too. So, no, I've done it too, and we're talking about war, so it kind of goes. But and I'm also reminding myself to put that in the beginning too to make sure. But yeah, I've done it too. So, yeah, thank you.
That's a shame how often it becomes a trigger.
Yeah, I mean, there's so many. Yes, and I mean, how often it is an aspect of this stuff too. So it's like, and it's an aspect of war, I think, that doesn't get talked about very much at all anyway. So yeah. So Paula.
Yeah, as you were both saying about the movie, or the war being the background of the movie, I think, and not that this would have been a bad thing, but if more of the focus had been on the war and what was going on, I think that might have shifted the focus of what was actually going on with Jamie. So I think that's, as a filmmaker, that's probably why those choices were made. Like I said, not that it would have been a bad thing that they had focused more on that, because it is important to know what happened. I mean, a lot of terrible things happen, and we don't hear about it because it's not just because it's a whitewashed version of history, but it's also because we were the victors of that particular war. So, we suppress what we don't, nobody wants to talk about the bad things that we did in that war, but those stories are important to tell as well, because a lot of what you hear is the sanitized version. But
yeah, and I think I mean, I think really a lot of the reason you don't see a lot of the horrific aspects of war, as far as like the graphic aspects, the, dead bodies, limbs, that kind of stuff that you normally would see in a war movie. I think a lot of the reason you don't is, of course, because you are following a child's perspective, and like we've talked about. So I think it's also you don't, they might have also been thinking children might be seeing this movie, so we're not going to show all of that, or at least young kids, like preteens and stuff. Which is not to say that there haven't been movies with children where there is that graphicness to it. But I think, especially when you have a director like Spielberg, I think Spielberg is actually, and I'm not, to be honest, I'm not the biggest Spielberg fan, but I think one thing that is really great about Spielberg in a way is that I think Spielberg is conscious of what he's putting on that screen for people to see, and there's a purpose behind everything he's putting out there. So it's not like he is just going to put the violence on there just to show violence, and because there is a part of that where it is the trauma porn and that kind of stuff, and so he's not doing that. um and yes, we don't like to, one of the only wars you will see where in film Americans are criticized heavily is Vietnam. That's one of the only times you will ever see that. But for the most part, you don't, because of the fact that, it is that you want to look at that, like it's a great, like it's great that in this movie you don't have, like you would in other movies, the Americans coming in and draping everything in the great American flag, and everyone is like dancing and celebrating and honoring the Americans, and like you might see an American being carried through the crowd or something like that, which you have seen in a lot of movies, and that's the way America is presented a lot of the time. And so for an American filmmaker to be directing a movie and to not do that is actually pretty incredible. I mean, in the 80s too, to do that is a pretty remarkable thing, because yes, this movie is very, very, very white centered, very, very much so, which is something that is definitely something you should always critique, because that is the lens we see war through time and time again. Especially in American movies, it's always like almost always through that white lens. So you don't get the whole story. You get the whitewashed version and the American version of what went on and the Western version of what went on. And, that's the thing that's always gotten me about war, is when you hear like America say, we have all these nuclear weapons, but no other country can have nuclear weapons. It's like, well, why are we, and I don't think anyone should have them, but why are we so much better that we are allowed to have these destructive mechanisms, but no other country is allowed to? And that is such an egotistical, we are superior to everybody thing to think that way. And I think that carries over into the films you'll see about war. So it's like we're always the good people, unless it's about Vietnam. We're always the good people. And I think the reason with Vietnam is just, I think, because of the cultural stuff and the things that we've seen, and how people just were ready to embrace, to look at it differently and critically. And I think also, I think there was just a different view on that. And sometime we'll talk about some movie that takes place, and because I've watched so many Vietnam War movies, and a lot of that is because my dad was in Vietnam, so I would hear his stories, and and that was such a different thing. And anyway, I don't want to get off on Vietnam, so sorry. But it's just interesting to me that that's the only one that you will see a critique of Americans. But at the same time, it's a critique of Americans, but it's not a critique of, usually, of the soldiers at war. It is the critique of the government. So that's a little bit different. So it's almost like you can be like, okay, we're not really critiquing America, we're critiquing the government, but we still were in the right, and we still are the better people. So it's, yeah, it's very interesting. Yeah. I mean, it's like with a lot of movies, this is the way it is. A lot of cinema in America is like that, where it is very much through a white lens. So yeah, and historical events are through the white lens. So and it would have been, it would have been interesting, although it might have turned into like a white savior thing. But if you had Jim and his friend, and you have, the the young British boy, and then you have the young Japanese boy who wants to help the young British boy, and they both start seeing, if you had more of that interaction, I don't know how that would have happened, but if you had that, it still probably would have ended up being like a white savior kind of thing, and he probably still would have died, but it just would have been interesting to get to know that character a little bit more than you did. So yeah, because you're not necessarily grieving. I mean, I was, and I'm sure a lot of us were when we were watching it, but you're not supposed to be necessarily grieving for that death. You're grieving for the fact that Jim has to experience that death in front of him like that. So yeah. Okay, well, let's talk about Spielberg and his direction and how he works with children. And I'll just let you know, I was watching an interview with Christian Bale, shocker, and he was asked about, was there anything that he learned from working with Spielberg that he still uses today? And he said, and I don't know if Spielberg still does this, but Spielberg told me, don't worry about hundreds of takes. Your first take will usually be your best take. And so Christian Bale's like, yeah, I'm usually that kind of actor, that I'm not one that wants to do 100 takes. So he's carried that through. So I just wanted to pass that along. So Carla, what are your thoughts on the direction and Spielberg in general?
I really like the way that Spielberg works with children. I think that some of my favorite Spielberg movies are the ones in which children are at the front and center, and this is no exception. Also, he likes two things a lot. He likes fish out of water stories, but dressed up in coming of age attire. So this is more fish out of water than coming of age for me. And he likes things tied up nice and tidy at the end with a pretty little bow. And those are not necessarily bad things. I think it just leads to like 4 different places where a movie can be done. It's like, oh, we're still going. That would have been a perfectly good place. Okay, no, I'm still here, Steven. I'm still in my seat. Tell me more. I know that I have a choice. But so with Jim, he's a fish out of water, but he doesn't quite grasp that he's that, because he's a kid and he's just doing the best that he can to adapt. And the way that Spielberg, I think, brings the focus to that is fascinating, because Jim is English, but he's never been to England. He has lived in Shanghai his whole life, but he doesn't even seem to speak the local language. He wants to be an American chill dude almost as much as he wants to be a Japanese fighter pilot. So all of these um things that on paper sound so contradictory and so conflicting are just natural things for Jim. It's just his existence, and that's all it is. And that's, I think, why it doesn't seem like such a focus of the film, because that's just Jim living his Jim life. And I think like a couple of times people try to point out to him these things, and to him he's like, so who cares? He's just like, like, I would love to be a Japanese pilot. I want to fly for the Japanese military. And as he's trying to surrender to the Japanese, he runs around shouting, I'm English, I'm English. But what does he know about being English other than what has been replicated in Shanghai? So he doesn't quite fit in anywhere. Even at the camp, he doesn't quite fit in, because he's too smart to not get too involved. When the doctor tells him stop thinking, but that moment when he stops thinking is when he breaks down about his parents. That tells you so much about who Jim is. And I think that that's a great Spielberg thing, that he layers all of these facets of Jim, and at the core he's still a trembling child. but he kind of distracts you from that until it needs to be a salient point. Because up until that point, he's just like this cute little kid running around, like um, I think I've mentioned before, I forget in which episode, about that very 80s way of children interacting and stuff, where they're kind of talking over each other and they're just grabbing things, and like the mom shouting from the background, "Hey, you two," and then everybody's still yelling and everything. And that also shows up here, where when the doctor's trying to teach Jim and Jim's just doing his Jim thing. Spielberg lets kids be kids, and he lets kids be kids on screen, where I think a lot of directors tend to want kids to be like precocious in an annoying way, where they talk back to people unnecessarily. They make disrespect kind of the cool thing. And with Spielberg, there's no need to be disrespectful. It's just letting the kid be smart and make points without necessarily putting down the adult in the room. And I really enjoyed that about his method. And like I said, the movie, it could have ended. I personally think it would have been amazing if the movie had ended at the point where he thinks that the atom bomb glow is Mrs. Victor's soul. But then he goes further, and then then you have the scene with the young Japanese man, the boy with the mango, and then you have the scene where he reunites with his parents. Any of those would have been good endings for what the story is. And I think I also felt this in, I think, watching AI, where I was like, you could have been done. I could have been out of my seat so much sooner. Like, bro, I'm not made for sitting for this long. But it works. Like, he makes it work. And I think that, no, this is not, I'm still talking. This is not, excuse me.
Get ready.
Yes, hello.
Hey, Christian.
It is so good to see everybody today on the first day of my month. I wanted to pop in because I believe that Carla here, though she means well, is missing some crucial things. For you see, I was there and she was not.
Yes, you were.
Tell us, Christian.
Yes. What was it like working with Steven?
It was amazing. I still talk about it to this day as one of the pinnacles of my memory as a child actor, of which there are unfortunately not many, as it was not the funnest thing to do as a child. However, I did come away with some fantastic memories that I will treasure forever. But if I may for a moment get a little bit more introspective, may I, Erin?
You may. Of course you can, Christian. It's your month.
Thank
You
you.
can do whatever you want.
I know that I am smiling. However, I need to adjust my face for this more serious topic.
I thought you looked very, very much like last time. It's
Yes.
nice to see you give us more expression.
The great thing, Judy, is that I age quite well.
Yes.
You can see on my face that I simply am now quite as handsome as I was in the other shot, but now I am thinking more deeply.
That is a very deep-looking picture.
It is.
I definitely see it.
Yes.
I am
See it in your
contemplative at
face.
this moment. And what I am contemplating is that I think that Spielberg did a fantastic job bringing out the best in a child actor. And that child actor was me.
It's me. Christian.
Well
Yes.
done, both Christian and Steven, then.
Yes.
Thank you.
Yes, you were fabulous as always, and we love seeing you. And I'm very happy to see you in this look. This is one of my favorite shots of you, Christian. I have to say, I
Not shot.
love
This is simply
this.
my face. I am just standing here,
Image shot.
but I am more deep in thought than I was 2 minutes ago.
I mean pose.
Pose.
An
Oh, okay.
outfit.
Yes. Thank you.
Yes.
With the hand is
Yes, with
interesting.
the hand.
This is my deep thought hand.
Your deep
Deep
thought hand.
This is when you know that I'm very serious about serious thoughts.
Yes, well, thank you so much. And I'm very excited to celebrate you again, Christian.
Oh, I appreciate it. And then you know me, I am a modest man. And I do not make much of a fuss about anything on my own. I will allow other people to make a big fuss about things because I am not going to stop you from living your best life.
But you
I will
won't.
simply go along with the flow.
Well, that's great. That's great. And I hope you are still very comfortable since you've been living at Carla's for 2 years now. So
Oh, it's on and off. No. I come back every now and then. I have been what's the word? I have
She
been
unties you once in a while.
Oh, it is completely voluntary, I assure you.
Oh, okay. Good to hear.
But I have been encouraged to not live here full time.
you've been encouraged.
Yes,
Gently
yes.
encouraged.
She did bring up a good point that in order to maintain my residency in Los Angeles, that I must sometimes live there as well.
Yes.
So now I only vacation here occasionally.
Yes, and you still bring the family and everything?
Of
She still takes
course.
in your whole family?
The children love being here. All the marshmallows you can eat.
I was
All the
just gonna
cats you
ask
can
about that.
pet.
All the cats you can pet. Yes, because I know you still love your marshmallows.
Of course. They are a heavenly treat. The little fluffy clouds that go in your mouth.
Well, thank you so much, Christian, for stopping by. I really appreciate it. And I like that you're changing up your look a little bit. You've aged very nicely, Christian.
I'm so happy to hear you say that.
Wow, that was a quick change there, right?
He's very versatile.
He
My
can
smile you just make me smile so much.
You always make me smile, Christian. And, it's always been my greatest pleasure that you are our unofficial mascot. And I can't wait to see you throughout this month. I won't bring up the B word. I know I learned last year that it's a
Yes.
Welsh tradition or
Yes,
whatever.
you do not want to jinx me on that very important day. I
Yes,
appreciate your thoughtfulness.
Yes, which I do remember the actual date. I didn't
I
really
did wonder for a moment, but I am glad to hear that you were just joshing. Ho ho ho.
I'm just joking about forgetting when your birthday was, Christian, of course.
Oh, you're such a joker, Eden.
Yes. Well, thank you for stopping by, and we will see you next week. I know. I'm hoping maybe you'll do some singing for us next week.
I shall consider it. Goodbye for now, Eden and Paula and Judy. Ta-ta.
Thank you, Christian.
Thank you, Christian. Oh my gosh, that man.
Carla, thanks for inviting him. Wow.
I don't know that I invited him,
Oh,
but
just
he's
there.
here. So
he's poked his head in the door, so let
he
him.
shows
whenever-
up when he wants.
Whenever we do a podcast about him, he's got to be there. He
Yep.
can't stay away.
Gosh, like honestly,
Like you're talking about
Interested to
me.
see how many different looks he comes up with through the month.
I think that the people at Walgreens may have some questions.
Yeah, why are they printing out this picture?
I did get these printed in Maryland, though. Oh no, did I cross state lines?
We won't tell anybody. It's okay.
All the Walgreens are talking to each other. Here in their
Now it's going to be the
system.
database.
Yes.
Uh-oh.
Well, awesome.
FBI
Well, and
stalker list.
Exactly.
I was so happy to see that picture because I sent that picture to Carla and I was like, I love this picture of Christian so much. And I don't know how to use it on the promo because it doesn't fit with the other pictures. So thank you, Christian.
He just wanted to get thoughtful for a minute. I mean, I can't help what his face does.
He's so funny. So, Judy, follow-up Christian. So,
Wow. Okay. How do we follow that?
Spielberg, your thoughts?
Spielberg. Okay. Um, yeah. So thoughts on Spielberg. Um I think he, especially in his early days, had this knack for capturing that magic, wonder, innocence, whatever you want. Maybe innocence is probably not the right word, but that, like that magic and that wonder of being a childhood, like very few directors can do. I mean, if you look at things like, ET and this movie and wasn't Goonies his?
Yes.
Like he's so good at capturing that wonder. Um, and I think it's because he has so much respect for children as whole human beings. They are complex, they're intelligent, their feelings are just as real um, as adults. And I think by respecting that and treating them like, just people that just happen to be smaller and have a little bit less experience, you can really get a lot out of them. And I think there's like a quote where he said that the way that he works with kids and gets such great performances out of them is because he encourages them to believe that they're capable of anything, which kind of explains how um, Jim acted through this movie, right? Like Jim is that just incorrigible. He's curious. He's exciting and interested in everything, and it just he feels like he's invincible. He's crawling through the mud to go see if there's landmines. He's making deals with everybody and winning all the games of marbles. And um, he understands both the Japanese leaders and the Americans and the Brits. And I don't know, he just has this way of building relationships with everybody. And I think it might go back to Steven Spielberg telling this young Christian Bale, you and this character are capable of anything, so go ahead and act like it. Um, but I also think it's really interesting that Jamie Jim, is at that age, that perfect age to play with. He's right between like that tween, or not quite a teenager, not quite a kid. So he's kind of different in the camp. He's a little older than some of the other kids. He doesn't really play with them, but he's not old enough to be treated like an adult by the adults. Um, so I think exploring that neat little tween stage, that's what makes coming of age's story so interesting, right? Um, but as Carla pointed out, even though he's had to grow up really fast in these crazy circumstances, he really is just a crying out child underneath all of it. And when he's doing CPR on um, the Japanese boy at the end, and he's saying I can bring them all back. I think he's talking about himself. I think he's talking about his own innocence, his own um, his innocence of who he was a couple of years ago. Um, and in that scene where he's up on the roof and he finally lets that inner child come back, this is another nod to Christian Bale's performance. He even raises his voice to a more childlike register. So, he's been talking to the doctor in like a normal voice, and then all of a sudden I can't remember what my mother looks like. It's a high voice. It's very childlike, very um yeah, almost a regression. And I think that's just such a fantastic acting choice of his, to really show us that he is just this, you know, child inside that was not allowed to be a child and had to be thrown into this older role too quickly. And he managed it, but there's boy, that kid's gonna need a lot of therapy.
Oh, yeah. Like years of it.
Yeah. But it was the, 1940s, so I'm sure he didn't
That's
get
true.
any.
That's true.
It was
Nope.
it was not the manly thing to
That's true.
do. That's probably why he wrote a book about his experience. Like, I'm sure that was a cathartic thing for him to do to get that all out and on put it on paper.
Yeah, I would guess that for sure. Yeah. So, Paula, your thoughts on Spielberg? Spielberg. Sorry.
Spielberg. I think uh, when I was younger, a lot of my favorite films were films that Spielberg had done because of the kids in the movies, and I think it was because they were so real and relatable. And I don't know if this is just a generational thing, but you watch movies now and they don't seem to have that same quality. And he's just kind of masterful at getting that type of a performance out of a child. So it doesn't feel forced. It feels very natural. And I don't think a lot of directors have that ability to get those types of performances out of kids. And this, you know, even as an adult, seeing those same movies, you still see that quality, and you feel like if you were in that situation, maybe you would, react in those same types of ways. Even in a movie like this, it's like, oh well, he's just a normal kid. I'm a normal kid. Why couldn't I? I wouldn't want to, but why couldn't I be able to do that? And that's a special quality, I think, in a lot of his films.
Yeah, I mean, like I've said, I'm honestly not the biggest Spielberg fan. However, I will say that is the thing that I appreciate most about Steven Spielberg is his handling of children and children in his films. And and like I said before, from everything I've heard, he's great to work with as a kid. And he's very respectful of kids and becomes like a surrogate dad, sadly, to so many of these child actors. And I would say sadly just because of, their own family not necessarily being there for them. But that's the thing is that, the children in his movies are a lot more realistic than any other kids you will see because, like it's been said, he has respect for children. And that's something you do not see a lot in movies or television shows or any media depicting children. You will either see children, like Carla had said, where they're just like acting out and, acting out, but it's not doesn't seem real. It's more like edgy acting out or something like that.
I
Or
feel like
you
they're
will
caricatures,
yes,
right? They're
exactly.
almost always
Yes.
caricatures. They're all over the
Yeah.
top.
Yeah. So you'll see a lot of that. Or if they're teenagers, you'll see them being, yes, teenagers try and pretend, because they're going through that phase of going into adulthood next. But sometimes it'll be aged up so much that it's so unrealistic that it becomes like you're trying to make teenagers adults too soon and it doesn't feel healthy necessarily or healthy portrayal. And I think as a kid watching that, it's not always healthy to watch that. But Spielberg doesn't seem that way at all. It's very much, I think what I think it is I think Spielberg has never lost his wonder and his fascination with the beauty and wonder that film can be and that magical land that you're in. And that is a very childlike thing in a very wonderful way. It's that when you're young and you're making up stories and you're playing make believe and you're playing pretend, and you see that permeate a lot of his films. And I think that's why he's able to have kids create these characters and to direct kids in such a way where it's so natural. And it's just like, basically, he's like, be a kid. That's all I want from you, is to be a kid in these situations I'm putting you in. And, having in the trivia saying he kindly directed Christian Bale when he was freaked out about the one scene, instead of being like, oh, I'm so frustrated, I have to work with this kid. Instead, he approached it for, okay, this is a kid. This is still a kid. Yes, he's acting, but he's a kid. And so he might be scared of something that me as an adult, I'm not. And so let me go back to feeling, as a kid. And so I think that's the thing about Spielberg films, is there's always sort of that wonder and that beauty of what it is that makes a child fall in love with make believe and fantasy and film, and what it is like to see wonder in the world as a child, and what it's like to feel like adults don't really see exactly who you are all the time, and not feeling that respect from adults. And I think children, deal with that a lot, where a lot of times adults think children are stupid and that they can't understand what's going on. And instead of, you know, realizing they're human beings, like has been said, they kind of just think of them as they're just little beings that are going to be human beings, or they're going to have, if that makes sense. So, but I think Spielberg never really felt that. And you can see that in any movie when he uses a child, he is basically, I think every child in these films of his, in a way, is a reflection of himself as a child. So, I mean, I haven't seen The Fabelmans because I know that's a loose story about actually his childhood and his love of film as a child. So, I don't know if that would explore it, but I do think a lot of the children in his films are a reflection of him. That's just my guess. So, yeah. So I think he does a really, really good job of that, and getting very natural performances from kids, and where it seems like the kid is safe and in a safe space and protected. So, which is a hard thing, I think, in that industry to do. So, yeah. Okay. Well, I don't know if anybody else is playing 6 Degrees of Finn Whitrock, but we have a rule for this one, because our unofficial mascot and our vice unofficial mascot have been in a movie together. It's a movie we will be talking about in a couple of weeks, The Big Short. Very light, comical movie. There is comedy in it, but
Not at all.
I want to
Terrifying.
rewatch that so bad, and I can't find it anywhere. Is it streaming anywhere?
It's not, unfortunately. It
I
was,
wanna
but now it's not. I don't know, maybe
Yeah.
by the time this comes out, but yeah, you can rent it for very cheap though.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, you can actually buy it really cheaply too. But yeah,
So
so since they were in a movie together, I don't know how we're gonna do that episode yet, because they're gonna well, how do you connect Finn? Well, Finn's in the movie, so I don't see how we're gonna do that. But so you can't use The Big Short. I have made that a rule, because all you'd have to do is say they were in The Big Short together. So is anyone else playing? No. That's okay. That's okay. I know when we do The Big Short. However, that's why I have to figure it out, because I have 2 members of my Finn crew on that episode. So I have to figure out a way
To make it extra difficult for them. Wahaha.
Yes, I will figure out a way. Okay, so I used John Malkovich, who was in Velvet Buzzsaw, which is a bizarre movie. I don't know if anybody else has seen this movie, with Jake Gyllenhaal, who was in a fantastic, fantastic movie that not many people have seen. That's one of the most amazing looks at grief, and that's called Demolition. And that also has Naomi Watts, who was in the series that just came out this past year, The Watcher, which is a Ryan Murphy series. So, there you could use anything with Finn. with Finn. So there it is. I tried to stay away from Ryan Murphy connections with this, but I just liked the fact that I could use Jake Gyllenhaal. I could use the Velvet Buzz.
Whoa.
I could use some bizarre film, and then also mention this amazing movie Demolition, which I highly recommend watching. It's a fantastic movie. Okay, well, thank you all so much for helping me kick off Christian effing Bale Month. Woohoo! Yay! For those who watch later and for those who stopped in and then left and came in and left, thank you very much. And I hope you enjoy this month as much as I enjoy this month.
This much.
Whoa. Okay. I don't know what that was saying. So we're going to go ahead and close out. So Carla, where can they find you? And most importantly, can they find your podcast where you did an episode about Christian Bale?
That's right, that you were in. Yes, Erin was in an episode of Bedwater Up Ahead in which we decided the fates of 3 Christian Bale characters. You can find the podcast and all of our fine trios at Bedwater Up Ahead on any podcast streaming service. You can look for us on Twitter for now at Bedwater Up Ahead Pod. On Instagram forever and ever, probably, perhaps, maybe, we don't know what the future holds, at bed.wet.behead.pod. We have a TikTok that we don't use, so you can follow us just to tell us that you like us and that you think we're pretty. That's at bedwetbeheadpod. You can find me and my art and my musings on Instagram at Carlatemis or my website, carlatemis.com. That's CARLATEMIS.com.
I didn't mouth it. Instead, I did a head bob to it. I don't know.
It's still appreciated.
So, Judy.
Yeah, I'm not all that exciting online, but I I'm on Instagram at TikTok at Ballroom Blitzgeek and Tumblr at Angels Watching Over.
Awesome. Thank you so much. And Paula.
You can find me on Instagram, Twitter, and Hive Social at It's My Sandbox. And I don't really post a lot on there, but that might change.
Did you want to do your Twitch?
Oh, yes. And I am also on Twitch. There may be some game streaming happening at some point in the near future. That is my gamer tag, Artemis75. It's ARTEMISZ 75. So you can follow me there and we'll see what happens with that.
Awesome. I have never been on Twitch. I'm like, I should go on it or not ever, but
it's mostly you
Right.
just kind of go on there and you can follow people and watch them play games. People do podcasts on there. They do cooking shows. They do all kinds of stuff. So it's,
Well, maybe we should do something with that at some point.
Yeah.
I don't know. Maybe. Oh, and this is Erin. For now, you can still follow me sort of on Twitter at eAprilBeauty. The E and the A and the B are capitalized. Be sure to like the show on Facebook at facebook.com/itsafandom-thing-pod. On Twitter at fandomthingpod. No, it's in that one. We are also on Hive Social under that same tag. I've posted twice. I will try and get better. So, or not tag at, whatever. You can also follow us on Instagram at It's a Fandom Thing Pod, on TikTok at It's a Fandom Thing Pod, on Discord, It's a Fandom Thing Pod. We talked about it. We're going to create maybe a Christian Bale Discord thing. Paula suggested it. So Paula had suggested maybe we do like a 24/7 streaming for our Patreons of just Christian Bale content, but I don't think Patreon will allow me to do that. So,
That would be amazing, though.
so
you can do it on Twitch.
Oh,
there you go.
Just have a Christian Bale station. That'll be a good way for me to get him on here for the interview. But anyway, we will maybe we'll create a Discord on there. I don't know, and see about that. If you have any feedback, show notes. If you'd like if you'd like to be a potential interview guest on the show, feel free to head over to our website. It's afandomthingpod.com. Click the contact us button there. That'll shoot me an email. I do have some emails I will be getting back to, I promise. But I am looking to schedule some interviews for the new year. So if you're a creator, please feel free to reach out to me there. I love interviewing people, and I'm very, very proud of my interviews. So, Christian, when I get you on here, don't worry, I will not interview you like other people do. I love interviewing and just hearing the process. I don't care about your personal life. So, yes. Okay. Well, on the next episode, we are still doing our Wednesdays now, or the Week in Pop Culture things that are making us excited and fandom and what we're into. But for our next Christian Bale episode and live stream, I'm not sure when it's going to be. Still have to talk to Carla because it's just going to be Carla and I. We're going to be talking about a musical and Newsies, which Christian Bale did not want to do a musical.
I'm sure you will hear his thoughts all about it next week.
And he was even like, maybe I'll just sit in the background. Everybody else can sing, and I'll just sit, even though he's like one of the main characters. So we love you, Christian. And you can find this on Disney Plus. So hey, this will be the 5th thing I watch on Disney Plus ever since it's been around. So there you go. So tune in for that. And until next time, remember it's a fandom thing. Black Lives Matter and stop Asian hate. And good night, everybody. I'm like, oh yeah, we're on a live thing here. Oh yeah.
Good night.